All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Presbyterian Outlook's Facebook Live series. This is the first one of 2025, and we saved it for a good one. We saved you for Amy Pagliarella, who is our book review editor at Presbyterian Outlook. And as we prepare to enter into Pentecost and the summer season, we know that this year has not been easy for just about anyone. And so what we need this summer more than anything, I think, is just to take a break, to escape a little bit, and to dive into some books that will give our brain space some peace and quiet, but also some creativity. So Amy has prepared a series of books that you might want to dive into. Make sure you have a pen and paper or your phone handy. Get your notes app out so that you make sure you can write these down. This will also be available later for you to watch. But Amy, when you're ready, take it away with what you have selected for us.
Yes, you got it, Jesy. Thank you so much. And I have to say how gratifying it is when I've heard that a lot of people tune in for these book previews, which is wonderful. It means we've got a lot of kindred spirits out there who love to read as much as I do. So I'm going to start by highlighting some fiction. I always think summer is a great time for fiction. And one of the books that we featured in the summer books issue is Stoneyard Devotional. Now, it's a very quiet book that got a lot of buzz when it won the Booker Prize. And what I love about it is it's a really quiet read, sparsely written, kind of has these nice slow rhythms. It's about a middle-aged atheist in Australia who decides to really take on this quieter life when she enters a rural sisterhood. And that's kind of ironic, right? She's an atheist and she's joining a group of nuns, but she really enters into this contemplative life where she just sees how life can be more sustainable, but it also resurfaces all these ghosts from the past. So it's an easy read with some more challenging themes. And I love when books do that, but it also sits with you and gives you a lot to think about. So highly recommend that Stoneyard Devotional. I also want to lift up the book that's on my nightstand right now, and this is a brand new release. It's The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. And I don't usually do this, but I'm going to recommend a book that I haven't read yet. And the reason, I know, it's crazy. It's because a colleague of ours, I'm in the process of editing his review, and he just gushes about what a terrific book this is. It's a long anticipated new release by a popular author. And our reviewer praises this book because of his descriptions of mercy, mutual hospitality, the value of beloved community, all of these things that are really important in our faith tradition. And what's beautiful is he's not writing from a Christian perspective. He's really writing from more of a humanist perspective. And yet all of the things that he's talking about are really important in the world right now. And so for me, what's really beautiful about it is it's about an intergenerational relationship where a young person and an older person are both socially isolated. And by coming together, they kind of create new bonds and they work against that social isolation. And I feel like that's one of the things that church does so well. So I really want to lift this up just for people who are looking for some good fiction, but also, let's face it, summer's a great time. If you're a preacher, you're a pastor, you're looking for the kinds of stories that you might be able to weave into your preaching and your teaching. And it sounds like this is one of those books.
Yes, awesome.
So, I love fiction. And I also love nonfiction. So what I particularly love is when an author kind of brings the best of both together. Now, this is a book I reviewed fairly recently in the Outlook. This is Becoming the Pastor's Wife by Beth Allison Barr. And it is straight up nonfiction, but she writes like she's writing like the Da Vinci Code. I mean, it reads like a really curious mystery, and yet it's all real. Unlike the Da Vinci Code. It is her story of kind of, she's, so Beth Allison Barr, sorry, I'm getting a little excited. Got to pause.
It's okay.
Dr. Barr is a pastor's wife, and she's also a church historian and professor. And so what she does is she really takes us on a journey with her and her students. So we feel like we're in her classroom, or even better, we feel like we are accompanying her on a trip when she goes into the archives of the Southern Baptist Convention. She goes to Europe. She goes to all these ancient churches, and she looks at the stained glass windows, and she goes into the catacombs, and she is researching. And as she does, she is discovering the stories of women leaders in the medieval church. And she is lifting these stories up, and she is debunking the idea that says, well, you know, we've never had women leaders. It's kind of a new, you know, a newfangled thing just in some traditions. And it's not biblical and it's not historical. And she debunks both of those to show that it is biblical and it is historical. And then she also does a bit of a deep dive into the archives of the Southern Baptist Convention. And she kind of finds hiding in plain sight some pretty horrific documentation that church leaders were well aware of nasty crimes that pastors were committing against, usually women. And she lifts these up, and she kind of calls out the church on why have we not taken this more seriously. And so I love this because I find it's fascinating. It's an easy read. I also think one of the questions whenever we read, it can be kind of tempting to get a little gloaty and be like, oh, well, you know, that's another tradition in the Presbyterian Church. We ordain women. So people might be saying, like, why does this apply to us? And, you know, some of the stories in there about the ways, the kinds of questions that people think they can ask pastors and pastor spouses hit a little close to home. And in my own church, Jesy, just last week, we had a pastor, an amazing pastor, candidating, and, you know, comes in front of the whole church, a woman, very accomplished, mother of two. And do you know, the only question that was asked of her by the congregation was a woman who got up and asked how she would manage to have such a busy job while parenting her two children. Right?
Which is never asked of a man, which is never asked.
It's never asked of a man. And it shouldn't, churches are not like we're not HR professionals, right? So there was no HR person standing up and saying, I'm sorry, that is an inappropriate question, and you cannot ask that in a job interview. Instead, it was a church. And so everybody feels like the pastor's life is our business. And so, like, that just kind of says to me, we've come a long way, baby, but we still have work to do. And so the more that we can understand work, like the work that Dr. Barr is doing, I think the better equipped we'll be to talk about why this still matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And plus, I think, you mentioned that just because we're Presbyterian and we ordain women, we're still part of the body. And so when one part of the body is hurting, we all have to respond to it. And so this is a great way for us to sort of get a glimpse into the lives of things that we may not be aware of. And so this was a very exciting and popular book when Amy first reviewed it, when it came out with the Outlook a couple months ago. So please make sure you add it to your list. Sorry, yes. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, that's exactly what I was hoping. This is a conversation, even though I sometimes run away with it, Jesy. So I appreciate that. But yeah, and the reason I'm including it now, even though it wasn't in our summer books issue, is because it's a great summer read. It's scholarly work made accessible by a very gifted writer, and so that to me is what I like to read in any time of year. Scholarly work made accessible by a gifted writer is also a way that I could describe The Wounds Are the Witness. So this is Yolanda Pierce's series of essays and reflections. And it's another one, if you didn't have a chance to read it when it was released in February, it makes for great summer reading because it's just really rich. It's stories about real people and real lives. And so it really hits that beautiful kind of applied theology or practical theology space. And so if you want your spiritual reading, you want your social justice, you want your scholarly reading, it all comes together in this. And so that's another one I'm going to lift up for this summer.
That's awesome. And just I want to put it in there. I want to put it in the comments too. That a couple of the ones that Amy has reviewed already are in our archives on the Presbyterian Outlook website. So if you want to go back and you don't want to just take Amy's word for it, like LeVar Burton, there's a whole stream of archives of reviews. I put the link in the chat. Please go read the reviews. People have worked really hard on them, and all of them come 100% recommended. So
beautiful.
It's not just Amy saying it here. She's doubling down on what she's said before. So
yes, that book was reviewed for the Outlook by a colleague of ours, Nanette Dixon, who does wonderful work down at McCormick Seminary in my neck of the woods. And so she also lifts this up. It's a book for everyone.
Awesome.
Now, this next book you won't have seen yet in the Outlook because we're covering it in the summer books issue. And this is by a journalist named Omar El-Akkad, and he writes, "One day everyone will have always been against this." And that name comes from a tweet that he wrote. He tweeted, I should say. Do we still say tweeted?
I think we know anymore.
I don't know anymore. What can I tell you? He tweeted, he communicated those words back in the fall, and over 10 million people have viewed those words. And he's talking about what's happening in Gaza. And I realize that is a very heightened, fraught conversation. But what I really appreciated about his book is that he covers so much ground. The conversation around Gaza is the starting point, but he goes back to September 11th when he was living, his family had to leave Egypt. They weren't safe. And they went to a number of different countries, lived in Qatar, and then was living in Canada. And his father, who had been a very respected person back in Egypt, like so many immigrants, was struggling to find work that he could do. And so he had an opportunity to come to the United States for a job. They said, no problem, we're going to get you a visa. After 9/11, all of a sudden, the visa possibilities dried up, and his father was not able to come to work. He's Egyptian, but by birth, but the sort of stereotypes and the things that arose after 9/11 allowed for him to be banned from getting a work visa. And so, this is, to me, this is just really thought-provoking, the way he covers so much territory from his personal life and from all of the things going on in the world, and really ties it all together, in ways that are, like I said, thought-provoking, really powerful, and just touch on so much of what's going on in the world right now. So it's very timely. But again, like these other books that I'm highlighting, it's also good summer reading because he makes it so accessible. He's a journalist, so he's really good at telling a story, really good at taking facts and making them accessible. This is the kind of book you would bring to your book club because it's going to generate a lot of conversation. Another favorite of mine, Good Soil by Jeff Chu. Oh my gosh, Jesy, this one has
gotten a lot of press. I've seen this everywhere now.
Yes, and he's been drawing standing room only crowds when he goes and reads from his book, because you read this book and you want, I'm going to sound really goofy here, but you want to be best friends with Jeff Chu. First off, you want to get an invitation to one of his dinner parties, because what he talks about in Good Soil, it's the subtitle of it is The Education of an Accidental Farmhand. And so for those who aren't familiar with Jeff Chu, he was more of a secular journalist who felt the call and ended up going to Princeton Seminary to study for ministry. He's also gay and had struggled for many, many years. One of his books is so sadly titled, Does Jesus Really Love Me? Because he grew up in a very conservative tradition and with a family that essentially communicated to him, no, you are not loved by God. So like, yeah, gut punch right there, right? That anybody has had that, people have had that experience. But from that, it has led him on a really beautiful journey. And so this is the story of his time at Princeton, where he worked at the farminary, where he was one of a select number of students who were chosen to do this work of gardening and digging in the compost pile and getting dirty, and but watching things grow. And it's beautiful. And so he covers some hard stuff. You know, he was a dear friend of Rachel Held Evans, and so he talks about when she died. He talks about how he has managed to stay in relationship with his parents, even though they have rejected his husband. But he also, like I said, he describes these beautiful agape feasts that he prepares. And so he makes you feel like you are sitting down at his dinner table, like you are a beloved friend, and he is honoring you by taking all of these beautiful things that he has grown and turning them into a feast that represents his family's culture and farm to table and all these good things. And he does this in such a way that just helps you see the life cycle, right? Of how even when we go into a situation expecting love to grow, even in soil, God can make that happen. And how beautiful that is. It's also a really practical choice for summer reading, because one of the jokes that the students have at the farminary is that the primary crop is sermon illustrations. Because as you can imagine, you know, you're talking about compost, you're talking about growth and new life. I mean, it's rich for sermon illustrations. So, you know, you get out your highlighter, you get your copy of Good Soil, you put this in your beach bag. It's such a pleasant read, but you will just come out so enriched and with a lot of good stuff to carry with you into fall.
It sounds too, and I mean, I haven't read it yet, so please don't, if I'm completely off base, you can correct me. It sounds too like a book that could be highlighted either in a small group or something along those lines, as we are in this weird tension of how do we love our neighbor who doesn't love us?
Yes.
And so how can we delve into this book through this person's experience and through John's experience of living as a living witness of what it means to love your neighbor even when they're not choosing to love you well. So that's what I'm hearing from you. Can you affirm that might be something to dive into in small groups as well?
You know what? Absolutely. And what I love about it, Jesy, is so he starts out when they first have their kickoff with the students. Kenda Casey Dean, who some people might know as a very renowned professor at Princeton Seminary, she gathers all the students together for dinner in her home, and she says about the class, "We expect love to grow here." Right?
Yeah.
So they brought together this very diverse group of students. And it's kind of clear in the beginning that, like, you know, there's a lot of potential for these to be people who don't get along, you know, just because they're very different. But when you set the expectation that love will grow here, and then you put people in situations where they're doing hard work side by side. I mean, it is something that a small group in a church could read, or a book club or any small group could read, and then kind of ask themselves, like, okay, what created the sort of fertile soil here? You know, was it the fact of people serving side by side? Was it people being challenged with deep questions? Like, what were all of the things that they did to allow that? And there are some times in the book where Jeff Chu describes a pretty tough interpersonal relationship, and times where he feels kind of blindsided, like he doesn't realize the things that he has done that have led to hurt or a difficult relationship with someone else. And so we can also follow those examples and then ask ourselves, like, are there things here that we could apply in our churches? Yeah. I know at my church, I have a wonderful colleague, Nanette Sawyer, and she does these things called deep listening dinners, where she brings together people over a meal. And there's a small group process, and they have leaders who are trained in how do you facilitate conversation around tough issues at the table. And as I was reading Jeff Chu, I was thinking, like, oh, this is kind of what Nanette and my colleagues are making happen, is getting people around a table and seeing what God can do, what the Spirit can do in that space.
That's awesome. Anecdotally, I'm interested to see if Princeton and the Farminary program get an uptick in applicants after people read this.
I know, right? I mean, it definitely sounds pretty dreamy when
Yeah.
I mean, if you're up for it. He's pretty candid too about, the really backbreaking work and the stinkiness of the compost and stuff like that. So it's not for everybody, but it's certainly made me wonder, if they would take me on for a week or two this summer.
That's awesome.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we do in the summer books issue, Jesy, but for our readers, we do what's called Books Briefly Noted. And it's kind of a place to sort of try to sum up a lot of the books that we didn't have time to cover during the first half of the year. So I'm not going to be able to talk about all those books, but I just want to give a little shout out to that because I try to cover a lot of territory. So if you're looking for more devotional reading, we have a book called At the Feet of Jesus, which is just beautiful, just invites people into either personal devotional reading or the kind of devotional reading you might do with a small group or even for a weekend retreat. So it's the kind of thing that, you're a pastor, you have to plan this women's retreat in October, you're not going to have a lot of time. This would be the kind of book you might read over the summer to get ready for that. Similarly, I try to cover a little bit of accessible theology. And one of the books that we cover in Books Briefly Noted is How to Teach Kids Theology. And that was a title that got my attention because I have for the past few years worked with our confirmation class. And this is another one, again, if it's summer and you're thinking, what am I going to do differently in the fall when all the youth come back, we hope, when all the youth come back to church, how am I going to use my summer to prepare myself for what I might want to do? And this is the kind of book that I would recommend to youth volunteer leaders, pastors, directors, anybody who might be working with youth and children, because the general premise of the book is that sometimes leaders are pretty good with the Bible. We can teach a Bible story, but we can't necessarily help children and youth understand just the fullness of who God is and the deepness of God's power to transform. And so it tries to use that as how that can be the starting point for, the work that we do with children and youth. So another really good one. The other one I want to lift up in that category would be the How to Have the Marriage You Want. And I only lift that up because I never recommend Christian marriage books or relationship books. The ones that come across my desk are usually not consistent with what I would try to, communicate about relationships. And this one is it does not fall into any of the stereotypes. In fact, it debunks the stereotypes. And it's useful for people who want to have egalitarian relationships, whether that's between men and women or same-sex couples, regardless of what that might be. There's an openness to a lot of different kinds of partnerships and very practical. So if you're a pastor who frequently is doing marriage counseling or has, premarital counseling, you've got people coming to talk to you about their relationships, this is the kind of book that I would recommend you have on your shelf so that can help you in that process.
That's awesome.
So lots of good stuff in our summer books issue. The last piece I want to highlight is some books that did not make it into the summer books issue because we only have so much room. But I came across two books. One is called Ordinary Time, and this one is by Annie B. Jones, who is kind of a small town Christian and bookshop owner. Just a wonderful reflection on, it's subtitled Lessons Learned While Staying Put. And so the idea, and this is something I think about a lot. When I read the Bible, we always read these stories of people who were called by God and they went they wandered in the desert. They went all over in search of land. They brought the word to people everywhere. And, that's not all of us. And sometimes we think that, that's maybe not faithful if we're not being called to go all over the place. And so I really appreciated the way she talks about the beauty of being situated in one place. It can sometimes be a monastic practice, the idea that you stay where you are and you accept what God puts in front of you and you learn the lessons that God gives you within that space. And what I particularly liked was reading this book. And then I read another book by Lydia Son called Here. And she has kind of some similar, tackles some similar themes, but in a different way, because she's someone who has a lot of wanderlust and feels, she gets settled in one place and she's already thinking, okay, what's next? Where can I go next? And she has to kind of talk herself into staying put in one place. So very different mindset than Annie B. Jones, but they both share some similar lessons. The idea that when we devote ourselves to a particular people, to a particular place, we can learn a lot about who we are, about who God puts in our path, and that can be a really life-giving way to live. So those are books I'm going to lift up in our Page Turners newsletter. So this is my final opportunity. I've certainly, I think, plugged summer books and our other book reviews available on our website and in the pages of our magazine. But Page Turners is a free newsletter that we write at the end of every month. And anybody who wants to subscribe to that can do so on our website. And it's kind of a place for me to highlight some books that maybe don't make it into the magazine. And it's also a place to share some of the reviews that we've published. And there's always a giveaway. So a lucky reader every month wins a free book that's kindly donated by one of the wonderful publishers we work with.
That's awesome. I'm going to put the link for the newsletters in the chat so that you can go ahead and subscribe now, so you get that out of the way. You are signed up and ready to go. Friends, if you have a book that you are excited about, that is giving you joy, that you think that other people need to know about, Amy's email is on our website. You can send her a note, tell her what you're thinking, and she can walk you through the process of what it is to do a review. If you don't have all the words for it, Books Briefly Noted is about 150 words. You can get it out in a paragraph and still let us know what it is that's making you come alive when you're reading these days. But we appreciate all of the work that all of our book review editors or all of our book reviewers do, all the work that Amy puts into it. We cannot do this work without you. It is absolutely important that in order to sustain the work that Amy is doing and to sustain the writers and the reviews that we put out, that you please donate or subscribe to the Presbyterian Outlook. That's how we do this work together. That's how we sustain this ministry. And that's what we believe this is. It is truly a ministry that is fostering and curating and courageous conversation. Sorry, my words are not coming to me. So please definitely go on our website, look at the book reviews. If you have things that you are excited about, email Amy. And if any of these books are exciting to you, we will put all of them in the comments later for you to click on. One thing I want to recommend to you is that you shop at bookshop.org, because we get a little bit of a kickback if you do that. And also it's supporting a small independent business that directly benefits the people who are publishing these books or that are writing these books. So please enjoy your summer, write these books down, go get them from your stores. Have a great summer. Amy, thank you for all the work that you've put into the summer issue and for being with us today and sharing a little bit of your heart.
Thank you, Jesy.
Thank you. And for everyone who tuned in or who's going to tune in later, thank you. And we hope that you enjoy all of the books that Amy has curated. And we'll see you for another Facebook Live on June 25th in the afternoon. We have a great series coming up for you. So come back in June and we'll do this all again. So we'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you, everyone.